I have a has a Sky Terrier.
Okay.
Is Neil not
It's
with
like
us?
this little long rut. But she shows the dog. She was out watching that.
He's got it.
I'm gonna tell you the one.
I'll say that we have two.
That God is great.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
That dog.
we have, how many people do we have out there on this Zoom tonight? 6, okay. We have two choices. We can continue with our work session and then have the regular meeting. It will probably take us 15 minutes or so to do the work session, or we can do the regular session and come back and do the work session. And then I think my preference is to let's do the work session. Public can wait, join us for 15 minutes maybe. What do you think?
That sounds good to me. Yep.
Okay, all right. So we have no board and commission interviews, the regular agenda, nobody ever has an issue about. If you do, let me know. Meeting issues and updates. Sarah, do you have anything?
Only that the directors were all kind enough to meet with me on Friday in person for the first time since I was doing my makeup tour of City Hall from last year. And I learned a lot, and it was wonderful of them to all take time with me on Friday. So just
Great.
gratitude is all I have.
Thank you. Emerson,
No updates, Mayor.
Pam?
I do have updates. Is my mic supposed to be on or no? Okay. Sorry. Green Space Advisory Commission met for the first time last week at Larson Park. And there will be a summer tree walk at Southwest Park on next Wednesday, the 23rd at 6 p.m. This is also the first time no reservations are required as things are opening up. So the tree walk is set up as a Facebook event and on the city Facebook page. They also reviewed, I don't know if you all remember, in April, we went through the mayor's pledges that had been presented, and we sent that one to the Green Space Advisory Commission to look at the mayor's Monarch Pledge. And they had a lot of ideas. They believe there's a lot that's already been underway through the programs in the Parks Department, and that they are going to review those efforts and probably pursue joining that, or they will give a recommendation. Plan Commission met also last Monday for 3 public hearings. The first public hearing was a CUP by Patterson Performing Arts, which we will hear later tonight. The second one was for the zoning code text amendments for the multifamily dwellings in the C and D commercial districts. The main purpose of this was to clean up dimensional regulations and setbacks. One of the main ideas that came out of this is that all construction requires the same steps and standards, whether it's commercial, residential, or light industrial. The commission did put that to a vote and it passed. So we will be seeing that coming up. And then finally, Douglas Hill, we had an initial presentation about Douglas Hill. And the overall ideas for that was that this project pulls together 4 separately zoned areas on one site. And the history of that site since 1923 is it's gone back and forth from commercial to residential, from industrial to planned community and so on. So that and all other efforts up to now have been tabled to redevelop that area. Mara gave a presentation about what the process would be. And that included going through the history of the project, how the development project will be moving through City Hall. Then we took questions from staff, and then finally public comments regarding the application were read. The next meeting is July 12th. And the request from the Plan Commission was to have that be a presentation by the applicant and the other department staffs, and there will be no comments read during that meeting, and those will be pushed to August. And that's what I have.
Thank you. Skip to you, Laura.
I really have no updates. I am going to miss the next Sustainability Commission meeting and wondered if anyone would like to volunteer to do that. Todd, is it the 21st or 28th? Okay, so it's the 28th at 4 o'clock. So that's a Monday at 4 o'clock. Okay, great. So I will get in touch with you and hook you up with time. Thank you very much. But that's it for me then. Thank you.
No updates, Mayor.
The Historic Preservation Commission, there was an update. Bill Wickman is the individual that was working on the Webster Groves Historic Homes Walking Tour with complimentary audio, and he's still working on that. The commission talked about other projects that they may consider looking at, and two that they are considering are a separate walking tour for Lustrin homes and Sears Kid homes. So they're having conversations around that. And then finally, Dave Buck asked if the HPC had considered making a statement regarding the redevelopment project based upon from the perspective of the history of the area. So they asked him to provide more information, which I believe he did. Provide additional information, and then they'll take a look at that and determine, what type of statement they may be willing to make from a historic perspective.
Marie?
Yes, ma'am. I actually have a few updates, so I will try to move through them quickly. Security team, you may remember as of the May 18th city budget work session, the budget was adjusted to accelerate some of the security features, cameras, door locks. So as a result of that direction, a security project team was created and they met for the first time today. That team consisted of Chief Curtis, Captain Perks from the police department, Assistant Fire Chief Painter, Todd Ray, and IT Manager Steve Bader, as well as Eric Peterson. And so we'll have recommendations for you all first quarter of the fiscal year. So that was exciting. Budget update, looking ahead from the budget adoption tonight, just some brief steps on what's going to occur next. We anticipate in August having the first conversations around the American Rescue Plan as more of those details coming out and sharing that information with you. The finance team under Eric's direction has already begun doing some of the work needed to receive the funding. So those steps are in place. Before July 1st, the budget book that you received earlier, this fiscal discussion will be revised to include all corrections as well as the adjustments that council wanted. So that will of course be put online. If you would like a hard copy of the book, if you would please let me know. We'll get you a hard copy. Let's see. What else do I want to share? Council chambers technology. I was thinking about technology as we were having Neil speak to us from above and the other things that we're experiencing. That is progressing nicely. Following the July 6th meeting, the IT team and Mr. Peterson will be working to install the new cameras, TV screens, and audio systems for council chambers. They have worked hard on that along with the public works team. So who's been in here doing some work as well. There will be a new system that will accommodate hybrid meeting potentials and will also allow person to control all audio and video components from one tablet. So that will be extremely helpful. And as you all know, chambers are our largest room to be able to hold any type of meeting. So this will allow flexibility for more use in different types of meetings. So we're very excited about that. So again, huge thanks to all the teams working on that. And then you all received your laptops this evening. So in the next coming months, as you know, we're doing large updates to Microsoft tools. We'll be using Outlook, Teams, SharePoint, and we'll just be moving forward with functionality of that. So Karen's ready to throw her good reader out the window over here. So hopefully as we move forward, this will all be better. And then lastly, on tonight's regular meeting consent agenda, you will see a request for council to approve a contract extension with developmental strategies in the amount of $50,000. And there's been quite a few questions on that. And so just as a reminder, originally in October 2020, the city received $50,000 from the developer. This was so that the analysis work could be done and the city was not paying for it. So this is simply pass-through money, if you will, so that we can do that. The extension that you are going to be asked to agree upon or to approve this evening is simply to make sure there are enough funds there for the ongoing analysis. And so happy to answer any questions about that during the regular session meeting if anybody has further questions. I do also want to clarify that developmental strategies works at the direction of the city. So this is not the developer, or excuse me, is not involved in that. The city is directing those analysis, having the conversations that you all are familiar with. So anyway, just want to repeat, we have not spent any city dollars in exploring potential redevelopment options. So, and thank you, Mayor. That is all of my my updates for the evening.
Right. I just have two small things. Laura and I are working on a committee to bring together all the parties who are interested in doing something with the Big Bend and Elm intersection. And we've got the university and the county and a number of other folks. And so at our next meeting, we'll update you on where that is going. Our Public Works Department too. The Arts Department or the Arts Commission has a couple of music events coming up this summer. There are 3 concerts in Glen Park and one at the Baroque under the Bur Oak that are coming. All right, so we're moving on to our topic, and topic number 1 is proposition.
Mayor, if I may, I have something I want to make sure you all are aware of regarding the ballot language.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So the ballot language has been changed pursuant to conversations that we had with the Board of Election Commissioners, specifically Eric Fay. We submitted the language precisely as it was written in our charter, but they have rejected the ability to have either accept or reject, which is what our ballot language calls for. So they cited us a series of statutes and some case law that I agree with that required us to change it from accept or reject to yes or no. Once we changed it to yes or no, we then had to go back and adjust the language because the proposal didn't make sense, because it gave you a compound question, and which was, should it be accepted or rejected? Well, if you answer yes, you've said it should be accepted or rejected. You haven't answered the question. So we simply, because it is a referendum as opposed to an initiative, we used the negative, which is should it be rejected? And then it's answered yes or no. So that was directed by the Board of Election Commissioners. We didn't have much control over this. Katie was involved in it. I was involved in it. But they were adamant that they would not let us use the language that the charter had required us to use. And as a consequence, there's been a change. So I make you aware of that. I think it's clear. I think that it will pass muster. I don't think that if there's a challenge, there'll be a problem, but that's why it is different.
Thank you. All right, we're going on to our topics. The first one is Proposition 1, communications.
Hello. And I know that we're pulling up the presentation, but I just kind of wanted to do an overview of the certain things that we're going to be putting on the website and putting out in the public, just to do kind of an education and communication campaign for Prop 1. Just some of the background, and Neil has gone over that. I can flip to the next one. Skip ahead too, if you can. Yeah. Okay, go to the next one then. Just to give a little bit of background, the City Council has not repealed Ordinance 9145 by a vote of 2 to 5. So the ordinance will be subject to referendum on August 3rd. And the council adopted this ordinance in May to advance the housing options within the city, and the August vote will determine whether or not this takes place. So the next slide. The purpose of this plan is just primarily an educational plan, and it's designed to promote the facts of Prop 1, which is going to be on the ballot in August. And our communications outreach will primarily answer resident questions and previous questions and clear up confusion on the issue. On the next slide, we just kind of wanted to highlight what the city can do as far as this campaign goes. We can educate with factual information. We can communicate the city's intent in pursuing this ordinance. We can explain and educate the process of how this came to be. We'll engage with citizens and organizations to disseminate all of the information, and we'll correct some of the untrue and dishonest statements that are kind of floating around about the intent of this ordinance. With the next one.
Jenny, can I stop you right there?
Mhm.
I'm a little confused. So I've been trying to figure out exactly where in either state statute or in Webster ordinances that it's delineated what the city can do and what the individual elected officials can do, whether it's prohibited or permissible. Can you clarify where that's located? Is it the conflict of interest statute, or what is it exactly that we should be looking at to determine the permissibility or the prohibitions in actions or performance?
You mean in, I'm sorry, David, was that directed at me?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Neil. So what I'm trying to why, so I guess what I'm trying to ask, a more direct question would be, where is it that we can only educate, not promote, or vice versa? You know, like where exactly in?
Well, there's case law that constructs the Hatch Act. So the Hatch Act is actually a federal act, and there are limitations and exemptions as to who's included and who's not in the Hatch Act. But there've also then been, pardon me? I'm sorry.
You, Neil, sorry.
Okay, there's also been, beyond that, there have been any number of publications that get sent out by the IMLA that talk about what can happen. And so you're not supposed to use public monies for the purpose of promoting a specific item. You can use it to educate. And that is always the operative phrase. That's the qualification. So again, in situations like this is a unique situation for you all, because this is a situation where obviously you had a vote, you had a majority that was 5-2 that passed the ordinance. So in this instance, can you as a board say, vote yes or vote no? No, but you as a board or a council can say, here's why I voted yes, or here's why I voted no in the first instance. And I believe that's educational as opposed to arguing for the passage or the rejection of the process itself. There is a significant subjective component in all of this, but basically it starts with the Hatch Act, David, and then it gets distilled down to state and local levels. The Hatch Act is federal litigation or federal legislation. And there's a little Hatch Act, and there's a variety of things that are written on all those things. But that's where you start in order to find out what you can do and what you can't do.
So does the Hatch Act only permit the city as an institution from advocating, or does it also prevent elected officials from advocating?
In my opinion, it prohibits the use of money. Okay, so again, you can't use public funds for the purpose of doing these. Now, again, if you as a council member said, I am voting for this, you could do that, in my opinion. Or you could say, if I'm voting no, you could do that, in my opinion, because you're speaking.
I own money in form of a PAC or anything like that as an elected official.
Well, there are limitations that are placed there, but there are as many exemptions as there are limitations, David. The statute is full of exceptions and exemptions. So it would depend upon how you're creating it and what you're saying. It always comes down to the specific language that you're trying to utilize.
Thank you, Neil.
Okay, and then what Neil was saying, what the city cannot do is we cannot expressly advocate a position, i.e. tell people to vote yes or vote no, or campaign on publicly funded time. The next slide. And so when I say the city in the context of our educational and informational work and plan, the city just means all official communications that are coming out of the city and any statement or expression that's made by the city and any staff effort or publicly funded action. So that's kind of the official city world of this. So on to the next one. Neil just went through the official language, and so I won't reread that, but I just will point out again that at the bottom, a yes vote on this is to reject the ordinance and a no vote is to accept the ordinance. So we do have this language on the website right now. Okay, and then I wanted to go through some of the information channels that we're going to be using to promote information to the public. On the next slide, you'll see that we're using branding a lot. Where we referred to it in the past as the A4 zoning amendment change, we're now just referring to it as Prop 1, advancing housing options in all of our outreach. We didn't want to use 4 different titles and 3 different things and call it the ordinance and A4 and confuse people as to what they're actually hearing about. And so we're also going to be using just repetition through the different channels by doing research and learning what the most confusing points are. We're going to hit people from print, digital, and other forms of outreach. So going on to that so you can see the specifics. With digital, we already have our website information page up. It's webstergroves.org/prop1, the number 1 not spelled out. We have an online form on that page where people can submit questions. And once we start getting more and more questions in, we'll add them into an online FAQ where I'll work with Mara and others to make sure that we're getting the correct information out to the public. We're doing social media postings, and we'll be doing some targeted digital ads and social media ads through those. And then of course, the e-newsletter, the Friday page is another great digital channel that goes out weekly. Between now and August, we'll be able to put a lot of information in there that people need. onto the next channel. When we're looking at print, we're
Can we
doing,
go back one more?
yes, no
What
problem.
does targeted social media ads mean?
That just means that we can target posts and boost posts that only people within 63119 are seeing them. And it just costs a little bit of money, but it prevents folks who maybe live in Kirkwood that follow our page
Gotcha.
from seeing it. For when looking at the print channels, we're going to be doing postcards. We'll do at least one, possibly two mailings of postcards, and then also printing those as kind of flyers that we can have out at the rec center and other places, similar to what we've done for the use tax in the past. We'll be doing some print advertisements in Webster Kirkwood Times, and then also utilizing advertisements that we already have planned. The community connection that goes out at the end of every month is another great place that we can put some information about Prop 1 in there. And then the last information channel for video, we've been doing some why I supported the ordinance videos. And then as time goes on and we get a better idea of the consistency of those questions and which ones are coming up again and again, we will do a Facebook Live Q&A. That's kind of to be determined, but that'll be closer to the election that kind of really hits and targets all of those points that have been coming up again and again. And then some explainer videos when looking at those questions and figuring out what is the things that people are most confused about. And is there a way that we can explain it in video form? Is it what parts of A4? How big does a lot look like? When you're driving down the street, can you tell? Like that sorts of things, just to kind of zero in on the things that they're confused about and figure out another way kind of in that repetition to explain it to them. And oops, yes,
Are we
David.
doing why I did not support the ordinance videos?
Yes. Can David and I do a why I did not support the ordinance video? I mean, it would be factual.
So Mayor and Council, so that's a great question. Thank you for asking. So this one is a tricky one because we support and follow the direction of council, and council sets policy. And in this instance, the vote was 5-2. So we've only been focusing on why the I support.
Doesn't that mean, this is where and
Sure.
the Hatch Act is a little confusing me. Doesn't that lean towards advocacy? If we're only promoting the opinions of one side, isn't that advocacy?
We are explaining what, and actually, I'm not sure.
I'm not
very-
saying you individually. I'm
No,
sorry.
I want to, maybe it's the very first slide. If we can go back to, there was a slide in there that made it sound like that this ordinance is not in place right now, that we're holding it until the vote takes place. And
Yes,
yeah, my understanding is that the ordinance is in place and it
Yes.
functions, and we're going to decide whether we repeal the ordinance.
Actually, that's not accurate. The ordinance, because there is going to be a referendum on the ordinance is in place, but we cannot act on it until the vote is taken.
And that's a provision of the charter then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So I absolutely was wrong then.
Can you tell me how much this is costing? What is the budget for this with all the mailings and postcards and social media and print ads?
right now, the budget that we've been working on is about 5,000, a little bit less than 5,000.
And that will take care of postcards, ads in the Webster Kirkwood Times?
Including the ads, it'll probably be a little bit closer to 6,000. Yes, but yeah, through the graphic work and the postcard mailing, we're at about 5,000.
Majority of the work is digital, so it does not have as much of a cost to it. To get back to Councilperson Franklin's question, though, a lot of this is, of course, policy that the council sets, and so the direction and how council wishes to move forward. In terms of, does council want to see the opposing viewpoint shared as well? We work at the direction. I work at the direction of council. So what does the majority, and I'm not asking this to be answered now, but philosophically, how does that work out? And I think, you know, recently we had a different split votes, and that was on golf carts. So, you know, having split votes is not a new thing or unusual, and this will not be the only split vote. There will be others in the future. And so in terms of how staff moves forward to enact the vision of the majority of council, this is going to have to be a question that is answered.
Well, I guess this is, I could care, frankly, at all, whether anyone advocates or goes out there and promotes their position. That's our job as elected officials. What I'm more concerned about is it seems as an institution, Webster Grove City as an institution has taken a position on this. And that to me seems a little problematic and what seems to me to run afoul of the hatch.
But would
That's the
that be
only
the
thing.
same thing if we were advocating the other direction?
I would be, I am concerned about following the law at this point. And my only concern is, are we as an institution, because that's our fiduciary duty as elected officials to care about the institution, are we as an institution running afoul of the Hatch Act if we are only promoting one side of the argument or one side of the coin?
But as an institution, we passed it.
Right.
So we do have a
Right.
stance.
I don't disagree with you, but now we have a vote. And so different rules start applying, it seems to me, under the Hatch Act. I'm not saying I'm an Hatch Act, but just based off of my understanding thus far, it seems to me that now new rules apply. It'd be one thing if there was never a referendum or initiative put on the ballot, but now that there is, it seems to me that new rules now have to apply.
Well, what does
I-
the attorney say?
Neil, I'd like your input on this, please.
So the answer is, and again, I agree with what Marie had said earlier, you have voted, it's 5-2. And so at this point, what you're doing is explaining why the vote happened at 5-2. Now, again, I certainly understand what David is saying regarding, well, it sounds like we're advocating a position, but you're educating as to why that decision was made. You know, if the question is, do you want to include in this, and would you feel happier or would you feel like there's a balance to say, but here's why I voted no? Well, that's what I think what Dr. Peoples was saying is that you all have to decide that. So you all have to say at this point, do we allow that? You don't look at Jenny or Marie to say, is that done? You have to look at each other and say, is that done? So, you know, again, at this point, when you say, can we add our no vote in it? I think you need to look to your left and to your right in order to make that decision.
I would just point out that last council meeting, we had a discussion about the sunshine law and about the need for some reason to ensure that whenever we go to the North Webster Neighborhood Coalition, we're putting it on the website because we wanted to follow the letter of the law to a T. And it seems to me that if we're going to follow the letter of the law to the T when it guards Sunshine Act, we should do the same thing for the Hatch Act.
Well, as I'm saying to you, David, the problem is when you read the Hatch Act, it's a very different proposition. And again, it is full of exceptions and exemptions. And again, until somebody says specifically, can I do this? It's very hard to apply what happens. I mean, the idea was it's supposed to deal with pernicious elections. And it starts out by prohibiting partisan work by federal employees. Now it's percolated down to ultimately what we're doing in our various municipal governments and now affects whether or not we can spend money one way or another. And are we advocating one way or another? So again, I think you all can say amongst each other, hey, do we want to add the no votes on here and take a vote on it?
As that discussion unfolds, somehow perhaps that becomes then codified in policy. And I share that because again, this won't be the only opportunity where there's a split vote. So this reminds me of the use tax. We didn't have these conversations with the use tax because it was a unified vote. But had it been not a unified vote, but been 6-1, 5-2, whatever the case, would we have done the educational materials, postcards, those things on both sides of the issue? This also gets back to a taxpayer issue. So just there's a lot to consider within this. And again, it was a 5-2 vote. Council.
I guess I'm asking what the request is. Is the request videos or is the request redoing all the education materials to say what happened on both sides? I keep looking back and forth because I'm in the middle of it.
Aren't you lucky?
Well, to me, if you're going to do an education campaign, then I think it would only be fair to include the point of David and me as an educational fact. That's where I stand. But if you all choose otherwise, that's the way it is.
And frankly, I was planning on staying out of this and letting the public duke this out in a political manner as it seems to me to be the more appropriate thing to do, but the fact that that is not what is gonna happen now, I would advocate that I want to follow the Hatch Act, and if we are going to present the view of one side, I think the Hatch Act would require us to, based off of my understanding of it so far, would require us to present the view of the other side at this point.
So that, to me, then let's go back to the use tax, because we didn't do that at all during the use tax. And I don't think you can, if this is about a not unified vote, it's the same issue if it's a unanimous vote. If we're gonna set the precedent that every ballot proposition, when we educate, we present both sides, we essentially then are not making any decisions before a ballot proposition happens, because our early position doesn't mean anything until the voters come forward. And I do have a little bit of a problem with that. I don't have any problem with the two of you making videos to explain why you voted the way you voted, but to do all the print materials and all the things that simply said, we decided on a policy by a majority vote. And we did also, we voted twice, right? We voted both on the ordinance itself and on the repeal. And so you know, our decisions matter or they don't matter, I guess is my.
And that's fair. I mean, but to be fair on the other side, Jerry and I did not put this on the ballot. This was done by 10% of the population of voters, and Webster Gross who put this on the ballot. So to me, that indicates a desire or an inkling to understand the other side.
David, we put it on the ballot. Council put it on the ballot.
Theoretically, you're absolutely right. We bid by a vote, but we had to because of 10% of the voters coming forward to us with a petition or with enough signatures.
Okay, David.
I
have to do our thing elsewhere. Any other questions?
No question, but the comment is that, you know, we did make a decision 5-2, and that's how the council should move in that direction in front of the public. Here's our statement. This is what we're going to do.
All right, thank you,
Okay.
Jenny.
Thank you.
Our next topic is the public works staff move to the service center and elsewhere. Is Todd going to do this?
So just a quick preface to this. I was sending you guys the Friday updates about the moves, and originally, and Mara, you certainly got more of the background on this, but originally, from what I understand, there have been a couple of budget requests that were delayed for good reason to help, planning department get better situated. They've been out of room, it's not configured well. If you walked back through there, they're stacked upon each other, and as you know, you have to roll out big plans, and so you know, Mara was really direly hoping that it would be included in this year's budget and not delayed again. And so we got to talking about it. And after speaking with Todd's section of IT, who does not have all of their staff co-located, and looking at how the building was arranged, we pulled together a team of folks and said, so what would make the best sense? If we are going to engage in this, how do we make the best sense of it? So I asked them to be creative. And they were beyond creative, and they came back with ideas I hadn't anticipated. So anyway, I wanted to thank them for being creative and taking some bold steps, and to have them share with you what it will mean for their sections.
So if you've been to the Public Works office at City Hall, we have the entire east half of the floor for our offices. There's 5 offices, 5 people. Mara's side, she has the west side of the building. It's smaller and she has more people than we do. So Dr. People suggested that we move one of our Public Works people down to the service center. But we came back and said, well, why don't all 5 of us move down to the service center? And that opens up that whole side of the building. So the 5 of us, well, Karen is retiring on July 1st. So 4 of us are going to move down there, and then the new person when we hire a new person. So there's 3 offices down there, and there's 5 of us. So in 2 of the offices, 2 people they'll be sharing an office. But there is enough room to get 2 desks and computers, and we're working with IT, getting all that set up. The move is planned for July 6th for the Public Works offices to move. We've hired a mover to do that. And then on then between July 7th and 8th, we're gonna have the painters come in and paint the Public Works area because it'll be empty. And then on July 9th, the mover is coming back and gonna move Mara's and all of her furniture from the west side of the building to the east side.
Todd, what, I know that there's some public sewer lateral, some other public engagements with your office. How's that gonna work?
So we're looking at the way the Public Works, or the way the service center was set up originally. It had a front door off of Waymire.
Okay.
But then when they redid the building in 2006, I think it was, they closed that off and converted that vestibule into offices. So we're looking at, and there's just a huge window there now. So we're looking at taking that window out, putting a door there, and then building a vestibule out in front and a parking area. So the public can come there, come into that vestibule area, buzz us, and then we'll come out and meet them out in that little area. There'll be a desk or a counter set up in there. So.
And I'll just say, in addition, with our magnet computer system, with our permitting system, it will make it a lot easier where someone can come to City Hall, drop off paperwork. It can be scanned and attached to the system, and Public Works will be able to see it from their facility. So with the upgrades that we're doing with the iPads, with our inspectors out in the field with iPads, as well as with the upgrades that we're doing to the portals, it'll make it easier to go back and forth between the 2 facilities because we will have the permitting system.
But we do still have public interaction on the sewer lateral. If somebody has questions about stuff, then they're gonna have to come to see us, so. But we don't want them to drive into the gated area, so, because we got all the equipment running around back in there, it'll be not safe.
And then on the planning side of things, we do have our new building inspector starting on Monday. We're going to temporarily push a couple people around and have 2 people sharing a cubicle space. We're moving some desks around on Friday of this week until the big move. And then we have another staff member that we will be hiring. So we'll be going from just 9 of us to 11 of us when we move to the new space. And in addition, there is a opportunity to put in a window similar to the court window so that we'll have a little bit more protection before people come in, that we can buzz people in to come, and we'll have a counter space now to roll out plans. We're also going to have an area where people can come and view plans or have small meetings. In addition, both because of the way Todd's office was configured, we're going to actually be able to have like a mini conference room in my office when I'm having meetings, as well as enough room in the building commissioner's office, plus in our file room. So we'll have 3 different spaces now to meet with people. Right now, we're spending a lot of time booking the conference room on the 2nd floor, and we'll now finally have some space in our area where we're not inside people's cubicles on top of their personal desk area. So we've got a pretty good configuration set up, and I think it's going to work quite well with our staff.
And she mentioned the counter. There's an existing counter down there that we're going to remove and reset up for their area that they wanted.
All right, any questions?
Good
Sounds
job.
like a good
Thank you.
solution.
Thank
And
you.
when do we get to come visit?
July 6th.
August 1st.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, I think we're done with the work session, and I apologize to those of you who are here from the public because we have just taken a lot of extra time tonight to get through our work session items. And so we're going to go ahead and call our city council meeting to order. Again, if you've sent your comment in by 4 o'clock today and included remarks of visitors in your request, we will go ahead and read that. Otherwise, you can raise your hand on Zoom at the right time when you're called on. So we'll start with the roll call.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Welch.
Here.
Councilmember Arnold.
Here.
Councilmember Bliss.
Here.
Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Alexander.
Here.
Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
All right, this evening, we have two proclamations to provide for our community. And I'm going to read these two proclamations. They really deal with our values of diversity and equity and inclusion and kindness and gratitude. So the first proclamation is a proclamation about Pride Day. And whereas the city of Webster Groves values diversity, equity, and inclusion and respects and honors the dignity of every human being, whereas the contributions of the LGBTQ plus community to the history and successes of Webster Groves are immeasurable, and whereas the month of June has been nationally designated as LGBTQ plus Pride Month and has its origins in the Stonewall Inn uprising in New York in June 1969, which, by the way, if you've not read about it, it is interesting. It's a very interesting historical event. Christopher Street Liberation Day and the LGBT Civil Rights Movement. And whereas Pride Month is a call to action for equality, liberty, and justice for all, and has become a celebration of our LGBTQ plus lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community, family, and friends. Whereas the first official Pride Day parade was in 1970, and for the last 51 years, our country has endeavored to celebrate the courage, dignity, and self-worth of everyone in the LGBTQ plus community through parades and other events. So on behalf of the city of Webster Groves and the council, we want to proclaim the month of June as Pride Month and June 28th specifically as Pride Day in the city of Webster Groves. We urge everyone in our community to join in this uplifting celebration of diversity and inclusion that is both national and global. So, yay. And our second proclamation has to do, again, with generosity and kindness and all those good values. And this one is that whereas generosity, kindness, and caring have always been important practices in the city of Webster Groves among families, friends, neighbors, and even strangers. And whereas 6 years ago, Buzzing Love Day, a day of kindness, was initiated on June 29th to honor the life and memory of Webster Groves resident Gary Baranyai, father of Jamie Mowers, whose life was tragically taken. And whereas Gary Baranyai was an amazing fellow and well-known community member who loved his family, who worked hard and had an infectious laugh, and also served in the Marines. And whereas everyone is asked on Buzzing Love Day to perform a random act of kindness to brighten someone's life in some way, a visit, a donation, charitable gift, simple thank you, smile, or any other gesture, thoughtful gesture, small or large. Whereas we urge Webster Groves residents to join others throughout the country now who are spreading kindness in a deliberate and special way on June 29th. Because love, kindness, and good deeds bring joy and peace to the heart and soul, and even the smallest acts can be powerful. So on behalf of the city and the city council, we want to proclaim June 29th as Buzzing Love Day, a day of kindness in the city of Webster Groves. And we urge all of our residents to perform a random and out of the ordinary act of kindness. Good. All right. So remember those 2 days. We're going to go on to our public hearings, and our first public hearing is the annual library budget report. And Tom Cooper has been with us for quite a while now this evening, and he's here this evening to give us the fiscal year 2022 library report.
Hello. Madam Mayor, esteemed council members, ladies and gentlemen, happy to be here tonight and presenting the operating budget for Webster Groves Public Library for 2021 to 2022. First of all, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about things the library's been up to. We're coming out of the pandemic, as you all may be aware, you might have heard. We're steadily returning to full service. We added Sunday hours a few weeks ago. The meeting room is open for smaller groups. We're seeing how that's going for a while. We began taking money and fines for copies again and stuff like that. The 1st of July, we will start doing passports again, which is, people have been really anticipating that. We talked to our friends at Kirkwood Library, they're starting soon too, but both of us will be doing it by appointment only because we think we're going to get crushed with all the people who need to get a passport. I'll tell you right now, if you need a passport this year, apply now because there's a huge backlog. Our first board meeting in person will be tomorrow night, our board's meeting, and it will be in the meeting room. So that's nice. We're meeting in person. There's also, you know, every July when the parade goes by, we do a nice display, a historical display about Webster Groves. This year it's about famous Webster Groves women. And this was supposed to be last year's display to coincide with the centennial of the right of women suffrage and all that. But we didn't get to do that, so it'll be this year. There's a lot of interesting women in Webster Groves. You may know that. TV personalities, radio personalities, politicians, everything. So just come by and see who we've got up on the wall. And also, I started a new project. This is kind of a personal project of mine, and it's really fun. I put out the word in our newsletter and Facebook page and all that, that I want to gather people's memories and things about COVID, what's been going on. You know, I've gotten so much great stuff already. I've gotten people's personal diaries they kept during it. I've gotten poems written on the death of a friend from COVID. I've gotten all kinds of stuff from the churches. They really responded well. It's a big fat folder already. And I think maybe when I've got it all together, maybe in the fall or something, I'll do some kind of a program to present it in some sort of a format so people know what we've got. But mostly I just think it's great to have on hand. This is history happening, so it's good to archive it right now. So that's a kind of a personal project. So our operating budget was approved at the last board meeting, and of course almost immediately began changing. But if you've all got a copy of it, right? Maybe I'll start on the last page, oddly enough, but that's where the revenue section is. And between, you know, taxes, passports, which are starting up again, state aid, you know, everybody thought we wouldn't get any state aid, but the state's got plenty of cash. So we're getting the usual amounts of state aid, 19,000 right now. And we also got, you know, the Secretary of State is what's his name?
Jay Ashcroft?
Jay Ashcroft, oddly enough, is a great advocate for libraries. You know, libraries, the state library comes under Secretary of State's office. And he's done great work for us. So we've gotten full apportionments from the state for the libraries anyway. And with taxes and everything, we anticipate income, total revenues of $1,632,000. Of course, we pull 450 of that, 450,000 right out to service our debt on the building. And that leaves us about $1,182,000 for operating expenses. So we go back to the first page. If you compare, and I'm looking at the 2021 to 2022 proposed column, you'll see that the payroll salaries have gone up pretty much, especially in full-time. And so that increases that whole section of the total human resources. I'm a little worried that we're going to get hit sometime soon with that high minimum wage. And so I'm trying to move our salary scale up a little bit as the years go by so that we're not really hit by it in the end. You know, I think as people, as a person, I love the idea of minimum wage. As an administrator, I'm a little bit leery. So, you know.
What is the lowest minimum wage hourly at the library this year?
Well, right now, the minimum wage is $10.30, and that's what our student shelvers get when they start. And, you know, if you talk about, for instance, a $15 minimum wage, I'm sorry, but I have employees who've worked for years and don't make $15 yet. So, you know, that's just the reality we're faced with if we see a minimum wage increase like that.
I think the cities is 12 already.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, as a tax supported institution, we do not have to do the minimum wage, but every library is going to, and we'll never get any employees. So, you know. That's where that stands in the human resources. The next most interesting section, of course, is the materials, books and videos and all that. You may notice that in books, it's 85,000 this year, down from 90,000 last year. That's because that money, if you drop down to adult audio, has been put in there. This is an interesting thing. A few years ago, everybody thought ebooks were the thing. Everybody's going to be going ebooks. Well, those have plateaued in the past several years. The real growth area is still audiobooks. People love those audiobooks, and an audiobook costs about 3 times what an ebook costs. So that's where you see that money shifting down. Ebooks are contained in that adult book section there, the 85,000. But here's another good bit of news. The state library just gave the MLC, the consortium of 9 libraries that were in, $250,000 in American Relief Act funds. And that's all for ebooks. So we're pretty set for ebooks. It's not accounted for here, but we'll be spending all that money in the next year. That's a lot of money to spend in 1 year. We'll try to get that done. But, so audio goes up. Everything else stays pretty much the same. Serials is interesting. Magazines, every time you turn around, another magazine goes out of print. So that has gone down some. Let's see, other interesting things. You know, utilities and all that kind of stuff stays pretty much the same year after year. Building and grounds, you may notice, went down from 90,000 last year to 53 this year. That's my best estimate. Last year, we had a couple of big projects we had to take care of. We had some HVAC repair from some damage. We had the big sign put out. I hope you've all seen our new sign that cost a pretty penny, but everybody really likes it. And we can really advertise our things out there. It only took about 70 years to get a sign on the front yard. So, and as I said, as soon as we got this done and say not many big projects, the back doors to the meeting room, one of them cracked. Those are 70-year-old doors, so it's a big split, and and they're so old and an odd width. You know, we're all bigger now, and those doors are narrower, so they're having to be fabricated from scratch for us. So that costs a little bit. Anyway, that's something I had not anticipated. And then another item is insurance. You'll notice it went from 11,000 last year to 16 this year. Our insurance just jumped. It was, you know, we've been with the same broker and the same insurer for a long time. And so I'm glad we haven't seen any significant increase, but this year we did. Plus our deductibles went up real big on like a roof. I can't even remember what it was. It's so high on the deductible for roof damage that we might as well, if we don't get the roof blown off, we shouldn't even make a claim. So we're going to be rebidding that contract this year. So that's pretty much it. Everything else is pretty much the same. It adds up to 1,181,000, which is about 1,000 off of what we expect the revenues to be for the year. And I hope the budget works. It usually does. We usually follow through pretty well. So anybody have any questions?
What was the biggest learning thing over the past year?
Biggest learning thing?
Yeah, what was the biggest thing that you guys learned as an institution?
Well, here, and I think this sounds like I'm really being, Webster Groves Public Library, I don't know if you know this, was open and having people come into the library way more than any other library in the county. We had our doors open and people were visiting way more than anybody else. Our next closest competitor was University City Library, but they didn't quite as much as we did. And this is because our staff, you know, sets rules and works smart, and the people of Webster Groves play by the rules. You know, county, they opened up for a little while. St. Louis they had to close because so many people were arguing about masks and everything. Webster Groves people, we had very few arguments with anybody. They just put on the mask and came in and used the library. We were so grateful for that, you know, and it helped us stay open. I mean, we weren't open all the time. No, we had to close when the next spike came and all that. But you know, that's what I learned. And it's not like I didn't know that before. This is a great community to be a librarian in. So.
Anybody else have a question for Tom?
I was just gonna say, I did note, I was liaison during the beginning of COVID, and it was nice to see how responsive you all were as far as there's a case of COVID, we'll close down, but we'll be mindful for 2 weeks and hope in 2 weeks. So I just like that positive attitude and how you really responded quickly in both directions, opening and closing. So.
Yeah, thank you. We worked hard at that, you know, and it's a balancing act, you know, with the staff, and everybody was so worried. I'm sure you all were too. You know, we really didn't have much information at the beginning, and so here we are.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you.
Cooper. We appreciate your updates.
All right.
We'll see you at the library. All right. Our second public hearing is for the Patterson Performing Arts at 45 West Lockwood, and Councilwoman, or not Councilwoman, sorry, Plan Director Mara Perry will give her.
It's early to get slack.
Yes, it is.
The PowerPoint is coming up, just a moment. So thank you all. We do have a public hearing this evening for a conditional use permit. This did go before the Plan Commission at their last meeting and was approved unanimously. So what I'm going to do is walk through briefly the CUP requirements and a basic analysis of the property. And we do have the applicant also here to answer additional questions. Thank you. So you have before you this evening, it is a request for a conditional use permit for use of an educational facility, School for the Arts. It's on an approximately 1.67 acre tract of land in an existing structure, which is the Webster Groves Presbyterian Church at 45 West Lockwood in the D Commercial District. The zoning around it on all sides is essentially D commercial. There is a little bit of PC commercial to the east. The existing conditions, it is an existing church. There are no changes that are being proposed to be made. They are using existing classroom space in the building for this use. We did, with the Plan Commission, go briefly through the history. 1867, Webster Groves Presbyterian Church. 1923, it was originally actually zoned E industrial and D commercial. In 1956, with the more modern zoning code update, it was completely zoned as D commercial. There were special use permits in 1959 and 1961 to reconstruct and expand the facilities at that time. And since 1962, the church has operated a daycare and early childhood care facilities also on the property. We do always, even though the conditional use permit is just a conditional use, we always look at the comprehensive plan. This area does say that it recommends that it be a religious institutional use, but you can have other accessory uses and other uses within the building and the facility. I'm not going to read through each of these, but we do always make sure that you recognize that these are the 5 factors that you will review. These are the factors that the Plan Commission reviewed and made sure to ensure that it would not cause any of these issues in approving the use. So this use is an educational facility, School for the Arts. They intend to hold small group and one-on-one music lessons for children and adults, maximum of 15 students at a time. You can see the floor plan of the structure. They're using a series of classrooms in an existing building. It's approximately 3,600 square feet in area. There is an existing parking lot as well as a secondary parking lot. It requires in the code that you have 1 off-street parking space for every 1,000 square feet of a teaching facility. So essentially there's really only 4 parking spaces needed due to the time frame of how the use is, both for the church, for the daycare, for some of the other things that occur within the facility. There's more than enough parking for this additional use. There are currently 92 off-street parking spaces between their different locations. Hours of operation are being proposed during the school year to be Monday through Thursday, 2 p.m. to 7 p.m., Sundays 1 to 8. And during the summer, they would be expanded Monday and Wednesday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Sundays 1 to 7. Before I get into staff recommendations, any questions about this conditional use permit?
Why is this before us?
Because when a facility leases out some of their space for another use that is not naturally accessory to the primary use. So a school that operates and has students that is a separate entity to the religious facility is not an accessory use. So if you lease out different spaces, we look at it, and if it's a naturally already approved use, which certain retail uses, office uses are already allowed. When it comes to schools, especially, the idea that you could have a very large school asking to use that facility. We do need to verify that, they don't have large amounts of parking issues. And even though this is such a small one, in order to operate and have their business license, we do need to verify that the use is allowed. So they're going through this process. We moved them through as quickly as we could. We normally kind of would have gone through, you would have waited a couple more weeks, but we wanted to move through uses that are pretty logical to be within the community.
Just wondering.
Yeah. If there are no other questions, I can go through staff recommendations. So this is a pretty simple CUP. We do not repeal any of the other CUPs on the property that are for the religious institution. We would put this in place and it follows the owner of the business. And then should they leave and say a different school wants to come in or if someone else wants to come in, they would get a new CUP. So all the provisions of the city code will apply except as modified in the ordinance. All the activities of this particular use will be within the existing structure. We did list the hours of operation that were requested. So Mondays and Thursdays, 2 p.m. to 7 p.m., Sundays 1 to 8 during the school year, Monday through Wednesday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. and Sundays 1 to 7 during summer months. And then this is conditional to personal to the owner and won't run with the land. The owner of the business is available on Zoom. Should you have any questions, she knew that we were going to pretty much cover most of the issues, but she is available on Zoom should you want to ask her anything.
Mayor, if I could just make one, just in terms of full disclosure, I am a member of Webster Groves Presbyterian Church. My understanding is because I don't currently hold a leadership position there, I do not have to recuse myself from this vote, but I don't want anyone to think that it's not something they should know.
It's so controversial.
Yeah.
I know, yeah, but if you know, I'm working my way up to a controversial.
All right, any thoughts or questions for Mara?
This is a wonderful collaborative approach between both the church and the school. It sounds really wonderful for the community.
Okay,
Does anybody have a question for Heather?
yes, does anyone have a question for Heather? I don't think so. Nope.
Thank you.
All right, so is it Neil now who does the closing of the public hearing? Is he up there in space?
I'm still up here in space, yes.
Can you close this public hearing, Neil?
Yes, ma'am. And we would move for the admissions. I don't have the exhibit list, but we would move for the admissions of the PowerPoint presentation made by the staff. We would include in there the comments of the owner, which of course were none tonight, but we would include, of course, the Planning Commission's recommendation and the documents that were presented to the Planning Commission, and of course, the zoning code of the city of Webster Groves.
Did he get it all, Mara? Okay.
Oh, here, hold on.
It's not my first rodeo, Mara.
I know it's not. Planning Commission staff report by Danny Jandusa for the meeting dated June 7th, 2021. The written statement from Patterson Performing Arts, the preliminary floor plans, tonight's PowerPoint by the Director of Planning and Development, and the zoning code.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, and with that, this public hearing is closed. And Councilwoman Richardson, could you call for Bill 9153, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9153.
Second.
Bill 9153, first reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit to Patterson Performing Arts to allow an educational facility, school for the arts use, on an approximately 1.67 acre tract of land in an existing structure at 45 West Lockwood Avenue in the D Commercial District and matters related thereto.
Any questions or issues? Then let's do that second reading.
Bill 9153, second reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit to Patterson Performing Arts to allow an educational facility, school for the arts use, on an approximately 1.67 acre tract of land in an existing structure at 45 West Lockwood Avenue in the D Commercial District and matters related thereto.
All right, thank you. Our next agenda item is remarks of visitors, and we turn this over to Jennifer.
All right. Our first one was received, I believe it was hand delivered on June the 9th from Scott Guerrero. Expanding the opportunity for duplex housing in Webster Groves would be a good thing. My wife grew up in Webster Groves and graduated from Webster Groves High School. I did not. We met at college, we got married. We wanted to move to Webster Groves, but could not afford to buy a house in Webster without help. The help we found was a renter. We bought a duplex and rented one of the units, which covered the mortgage. Renters wanted their children to benefit from the excellent schools in Webster. Our first child was born when we lived in that duplex. We later moved to a single-family residence in Webster and sold the duplex. There are many benefits of living in Webster Groves. Webster Groves offers people from different social and economic backgrounds an opportunity to live together in a safe and secure environment. We share experiences together. The recreation complex, libraries, an eclectic choice of restaurants, beautifully maintained parks, public and private schools, diverse church congregations, et al. Our youth sports teams, whether public or parochial, don't have family income thresholds to join. Duplex housing helps to keep the cost of living in Webster affordable. Opponents to duplex housing have suggested that if permitted, developers would not build duplexes because they would not get an adequate return on investment. So what? If the economics don't justify building, then they won't. But what if the return is adequate? Why close the door if construction meets strict building codes? More valuable residences and more families means more tax revenue for the city. We have now lived together in Webster for over 40 years and are grateful that the duplex experience facilitated a wonderful life for our family in Webster Groves. All right, our next one is from Michael Chakudian. It was received, first received on June the 13th. And then we've also got a second part that was received on the 14th. I am very concerned about any proposed, the upcoming Old Webster redevelopment plan. My specific questions are this. I asked for on previous email and never got an answer. Is there a traffic study being done for Lockwood Boulevard? Does the carbon footprint of the project meet national and international guidelines? Further, for the record, I am totally against any subsidies, and unless a third of the project is dedicated to the arts, I will be totally against it. My family has lived at 138 West Cedar since 1985. And then the second part received on the 14th. I would like to add a question after my review of the traffic study. Why doesn't the city of Webster Groves have its own impact study of traffic guidelines that designate impact benchmarks that are approved by the residents of a city, rather than using the ones this study used for St. Louis County, which are used by many municipalities that are not compatible in community makeup, i.e. population, types of buildings, lot sizes, percentages of commercial, office, warehouse, and service buildings to residential, or in the demographics of Webster Groves. Knowing that, we should stop right there, set our own benchmarks as a city rather than benchmarks of other cities or unincorporated cities in St. Louis County. Please let me know of the procedures necessary to make this happen. This is from Dave Buck, received on the 14th. Dear Mayor, City Council, and City staff, I do not know the current status of the city's important diversity, equity, inclusion efforts regarding training and community conversations. However, I am grateful for your recognition of Pride Month tonight, as it reflects a personal belief I share below. Racism against Blacks is America's original sin, but I think it is one part of a much bigger and deeper national problem, which is the rejection of diversity. Throughout American history, anyone who has been different than the white, straight Protestant man in power has been discriminated against, alienated, oppressed, and even killed and massacred, including Blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, and Indigenous people, Japanese and Asians, women, Jews, Muslims, the LGBTQ community, migrants and immigrants, the poor and houseless, the handicapped and mentally ill, the overweight and obese, and the list goes on. It is not a great track record. Now deceased, the famed Black social activist Audre Lorde simply and profoundly defined the diversity challenge this way. It is not our differences that divide us, it is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate our differences. Now there's a concept. Instead of arguing and fighting over our differences, let's look for the good in them and celebrate our differences. Just maybe it will help break down a few barriers between us and help us come together as one community, one nation, and one world, and celebrate diversity as meaning different individuals valuing everyone's heritage, skin color, beliefs, custom, and lifestyle. So what do you say, Webster Groves? What do you say we start celebrating diversity in our community today, tomorrow, and forever? Peace, Dave. This is from Mary Garavaglia, was received on the 14th. Okay. I agree with building equity through home ownership. Keita Quinn expressed it best when she talked about relationship and community building with homes, neighborhoods, and help by the Community Land Trust. I see the SG Collaborative as the antithesis of that goal. The apartments are reminiscent of Cabrini Green, Chicago, and Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis. Even better thought out, Laclede Town proved doomed. Build neighborhoods, not apartment complexes. See attached letter for additional comments, which is this. Is the wrong project being pushed for the right reasons? Developing housing for a diversified group is a right and lofty goal. Your reasons are good. Developing inexpensive, built for obsolescence block houses for underemployed residents are doomed to failure. Glaring examples of failed major expenditures in construction to that end or below. Laclede Town, Cabrini Green, and Pruitt-Igoe. All demolished and failed attempts to provide low-cost housing. Your project is doomed unless residents have employment or are employable and have access to transportation. Subsidies to build are needed in the beginning and will achieve short-term goals. Housing. Long-term planning has got to have subsidizing initiatives for upkeep and operations. The projects below are the reason to be wary of short-term gains, ignoring long-term perils. Please learn from these housing project histories below, otherwise we will share in the repeat of failures and catastrophic loss of investments, land, resources, and money. And she has some links. Initially, the creators of Laclede Town and the city at large achieved their goals. New residents quickly moved in to the cleared Mill Creek Valley area. Only days after the completion of its last building, Laclede Town's occupancy was 100%. Additionally, the new tenants were diverse. At the height of occupancy, between 60% to 70% of tenants were white, 20 to 30% were Black, and 10% were other minorities, including many immigrants to the US. In fact, a 1965 story published in newspapers across the country breathlessly reported that children of no less than 6 races played together. For better or worse, Laclede Town's legacy is one of hope and optimism, as well as neglect and ultimately defeat. It offers significant lessons about housing, race, and public policy, and should serve as an inspiration and a cautionary tale for anyone who might venture to create their own version of an urban utopia. At its peak, Cabrini Green was home to 15,000 people, mostly living in mid and high-rise apartment buildings. Crime and neglect created hostile living conditions for many residents, and Cabrini Green became a metonym for problems associated with public housing in the United States. In 1995, CHA began tearing down dilapidated mid and high-rise buildings, with the last demolished in 2011. Today, only the original 2-story row houses remain. Unlike many of the city's other public housing projects, such as Rockwell Gardens or Robert Taylor Homes, Cabrini Green was situated in an affluent part of the city. The poverty-stricken projects were actually constructed at the meeting point of Chicago's 2 wealthiest neighborhoods, Lincoln Park and the Gold Coast, less than a mile to the east at Michigan Avenue with its high-end shopping and expensive housing. Specific gangs controlled. Okay. That's our 3 minutes. Okay, and then our last one is from Daniel Berzini, and that was received on the 15th. The first rule of finding oneself in a hole is stop digging. Our Webster Grove City Council finds itself in a sizable budgetary hole. Our city now faces a budget deficit of $5.3 million, cost to repair City Hall and the Service Center in excess of $1.6 million, tax collections increasing at a paltry 2.4%, while city council expenditures, mostly salaries and pensions, are increasing an unsustainable 14%. Between fiscal year 2018 and 2022, personnel costs are up by an unsustainable $1.9 million, with tax collections growing only by $547,000 during that same time period, and continued consecutive $1 million deficit spending for fiscal years 2019, 2020, 2021, and now the highest deficit of all projected for 2022. Uninterrupted budget deficits of this magnitude would cause reasonable municipal governments to choose fiscal responsibility for the homeowners and taxpayers who support the community. It does not mean finding a better excuse. It does not mean disparaging voters who oppose the council's recent failed tax increase as uninformed, or conducting a better PR campaign for even higher taxes for Webster residents, such as the voter rejected 13th use tax on internet sales. The city council can't continue to deficit spend. In July 2019, the projected general fund reserve balance for the end of the current fiscal year was nearly $12 million. Now the city can only expect to have roughly $8.5 million in reserve general revenues. And the reserve fund is now below the recommended level of 50% of expenditures. That reserve fund took decades to accumulate, but Webster Groves is now on its way to spend it down to zero in just a few years. Property values, essential services, Infrastructure and public safety will decrease. Overspending to create a crisis in order to squeeze the residents to vote for higher taxes is so plainly wrong. The Webster Kirkwood Times wrote recently lamented the poor condition of our skate park. Maybe instead of pouring a beautiful concrete pad for the Earth Rabbits pedestal outside the rec center, Webster could have poured that concrete into skate park for our children to enjoy. Why is the city council not listening to the expert financial advice from the financial professionals in City Hall? They recommended, number one, not to give 2% COLA pay increase, saves $500,000. 2, to not give 1.5% performance pay increase. 3, to not give part-time employees sick leave, vacation time, and pay increases. With a $5.3 million deficit, you don't need to wait for a $30,000 pay and compensation study to stop digging a larger fiscal deficit. Listen to your own experts. You have a fiduciary responsibility to the residents who are at the top of the city's organizational chart. Does the city council prefer to wait until their credit cards get maxed out to create the crisis needed to exploit the residents of Webster Groves for even more taxes? And then let's see. We might have a hand up. Why am I- Clark Hoteling has his hand up, so I'll give him to talk, and Clark, you'll have 3 minutes. You should be clear.
All right, am I unmuted?
Yeah, no, you should be good.
All right. Hey, I really appreciated the conversation tonight around communication of Proposition 1. It was really interesting to me. I also appreciate the 2 votes that council had for advancing housing options in Webster Groves. And finally, I also appreciate the different opinions and Councilwoman Franklin and Mayor Welch's comments against are on record. And maybe something like what the Supreme Court does in presenting a dissented view makes sense. I don't think it makes sense to spend money on promoting something that the council voted for, but I think a dissenting view is totally appropriate. While I am wholeheartedly for Ordinance 9145, which tonight I'm finding out means I'm against Proposition 1, I got to get my head wrapped around that one. And I appreciate other opinions. I was extremely disappointed by Mayor Welch's quote in the Webster Kirkwood Times in her comment at the last meeting, that it was her hope that we would rescind the ordinance and explore ways that neighboring communities like Kirkwood are doing this, not in the middle of residential neighborhoods, but with consideration like transition areas. To me, that sounds like renters are okay as long as they're on the other side of the tracks or not in my neighborhood. And as a resident, I personally would love to have renters or a duplex next to me as opposed to everyone sort of looking exactly like I do. I think that that would really build the character of our community. And I just, I don't know if the quote is how the mayor feels, but it comes off, and language is really important, that it sounds like we don't want these people in the middle of a residential community. And someone who's for this ordinance, my only regret is that it doesn't include all the residential areas of Webster. So thank you, council, for advancing housing options in Webster Groves. And I truly hope that the voters look at the information that's coming out, don't listen to the misinformation, and really make up their opinion. And hopefully that they will vote no on Proposition 1. Thank you.
Is that it?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And
There are no other hands up.
pardon?
You're good.
Okay, then we will continue along with unfinished business. We have a couple of third readings here. Councilmember Smith, Bill 9150, please.
Yes, Mayor, I would like to call for the third and final reading of Bill number 9150 and call for subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9150, third reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit to the Willow in Webster to allow banquet facility and dancing academy uses on an approximately 0.45 acre tract of land in an existing structure at 60 North Gore Avenue in the D Commercial District and matters related thereto.
Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss. Yes. Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
And Mayor Welch.
Yes. Bill 9150 has passed. Councilmember Bliss, 9151, please.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of bill number 9151 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9151, third reading. An ordinance defining the classified service of the city of Webster Groves, fixing the compensation for employees in said classifications, and repealing ordinance 9123.
Are there any questions or issues? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Bliss. Yes. Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
All right, 9151 has passed. Councilwoman Arnold, 9152, please.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of Bill number 9152 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9152, third reading. An ordinance fixing the compensation of persons in the unclassified service of the city of Webster Groves and repealing ordinance 9124.
Any questions or issues? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes. All
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
right, 9152 is passed. We're on to new business. Councilmember Franklin, could you call for resolution 2021-28, please?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the adoption of resolution number 2021-28. Its subsequent adoption.
Second.
It's the adoption of the budget for fiscal year 2022. All right, are there any questions or issues before we call for the vote?
I just, want to say, we got lots of work to do in the next couple of years, and I think we all know that, and I think this is really challenging, and that's really it. We got lots of work to do.
I hope you'll respect my opinion in this and not think that I'm just a crank, but in the year 2009 and 2010, the city enacted a fund balance policy, and I was one of those who voted to enact this. And that fund balance policy says that we will keep a minimum of 50% of our operating expenditures to cover funding for 6 months and provide liquidity for the city. We have maintained a reserve fund of 50% or larger, and it's been to our advantage. For one thing, we've had a very healthy bond rating because of that, and the interest payments on our debt, like the debt for the new firehouse and street improvements, have really been low. And we're hoping for the same thing when we go out for a new aquatic facility. We've also been able to weather the storm during the pandemic because we've had such a sizable reserve fund. But the coming year for the budget has been proposed, it should be a healthy year for reserves. And yet we have proposed a budget deficit of $2 million. This added to the 2 previous years with pandemic issues brought our reserves from 12 million to now close to 8.5 million. With the fund balance policy, we would need to keep that reserve at 9.6 million this year. And with this current budget, we're 1.2 million short of that 50% policy. Now, I know this is tough, and I know that the demands are placed on the city for funding. But the stingy economist side of me says that we need to pull in some of those expenditures, do some planning over the next 2 years. The proposed budget and the spending's not sustainable. The previous administration may have gone a little overboard with saving money at the expense of some needs in the city, like technology and security, but the budgets were balanced. And for me, I'm going to vote no because this budget violates a policy that I voted to pass. So I wanted to say that. Call for the vote.
Well, I would just say, Mayor, I just want to, we are fortunate this year because of the federal relief that
Yes.
we are not in dire straits. We are in dire straits when you look at it long-term. And like Laura said, I think we have a lot of work to do, but just so the citizens know, we're not begging for money right now. And that is in great part because we have federal relief money coming.
Yes. Thank you. All right, call for the vote.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Welsh,
No.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
All right, we've got our work to do to get that reserve back. All right, Councilwoman Richardson, could you call for approval of the consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Oh, sorry. Big turn up.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Welsh.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss. Yes. Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
We have no appointments for boards and commissions, but we are going to, the council is going into an executive closed session. And again, we ask our trusty executive closed session council member to
I think it's if you sit in this chair, you have to do that. Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed session under number 3 Personnel Missouri Statute 610.021, open paren 3, close paren.
Second.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Welsh.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss. Yes. Councilmember Franklin,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
All right, we'll take a few minute break here while everybody gets their act together. It would be nice if we could